Welcome, everyone. This is Ted Hayter with the Greater Huron Development Corporation. We're presenting today's South Dakota CARES Act grant webinar. With me in the room are Senator Jim White and Representative Roger Chase. Online is Representative Hugh Bartles. Hugh, would you wave to everyone?
I'm here. Thank you.
Presentation format today. We will go through the slides that you're seeing on your screen. We'll give the legislators a chance to follow up with more information at the end. And after the legislators are done, we'll have time for questions and answers. If you have questions, we would ask that you put them into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and they will be addressed at the end of the presentation after the legislators speak. We're talking about the requirements for small businesses and nonprofits in this presentation. Again, I am Ted Hayter, your presenter, and this presentation and the webinar video will be available at our website, greaterhuron.com. The South Dakota CARES Act grant program was approved on October 5th. The application will be available soon, and the deadline will be October 23rd. Federal rules require that this money be sent out to businesses no later than the 30th of December. There's no restrictions on how the funds can be used, and the final rules are mostly unchanged from a previous session that we had if you came to our presentation in Huron about a week and a half ago. Requirements that have not changed: grants will be made up to $100,000. Your business must be located in South Dakota. The reduction of at least 25% in business, and we'll show how that's calculated in a few slides. And your gross revenues not to exceed $38.5 million. And that amount includes most businesses in the state of South Dakota. And that is Small Business Administration's definition of a small business, under $38.5 million. And businesses will have to certify that they plan on continuing operations if they receive these dollars. A few more changes from the original proposal. There is no minimum gross income. Originally, it was $50,000 in the proposal. That was worked down to $25,000, and now there is no minimum gross income. A minimum grant award was established. Separate funding for nonprofits and startup businesses has been added in, and there's more details in the following pages. Again, the minimum gross income has been removed, so it doesn't matter how small your business is. If you are affected and you need help, you're going to be eligible. The minimum award will be $750. So if you have a loss in business after all your calculations are done and you're over $750 impacted by COVID, you'll be eligible. And if you're under $750, you will not be eligible for a grant. That is a hard number that will not change. Nonprofit organizations have a separate funding allotment of $40 million. What we're concerned with today is a $400 million allotment that the legislature set aside for small businesses. Nonprofits are eligible unless they receive tax dollars from a local government entity like a city, and the organizations that would generally fall under that are chambers, development corporations, or anybody else that might receive an annual allocation from a local government. Those grant awards will be based on a pro rata share, and we're going to go over that definition in a little bit. $10 million has been set aside for startup businesses. Originally, this was set up on a calculation of 2020 versus 2019. And your legislators listened to your input. And when the question was asked, what about businesses that weren't in operation in March of 2019? So there is a set aside of $10 million for those newly started businesses to access if they were impacted by COVID. Startup businesses will calculate a little bit differently. March 1st to August 31st of 2020. If you were less than 120% of average monthly income prior to March 1st, or, so this is an either or test, you do not have to meet both of these. Or if you operated at a net loss in at least 3 of those 6 months between March 1st and August 31st. And the grant amount will be 20% of businesses' cash expenses March to August. You cannot factor in depreciation, amortization, other non-cash expenses. And when you calculate all of your losses, you have to subtract out your Paycheck Protection Grant if you received it, or any other federal funds that would be grant dollars. We're going to go through a quick sample calculation. This is just a group of numbers that we put together in the next slide to show how this is going to be calculated for your cash flow 2019, cash flow 2020, and the impact on your business. In this example, the business had $1 million in sales from March to August in 2019. Their cash expenses were $750,000, and their principal debt payment, not their interest, just the principal on debt payments was $25,000, for a total cash flow from March to August of 2019 of $225,000. That same business in 2020 for the March to August period had $750,000 in gross income, $650,000 in expenses, and continued with that principal debt payment of $25,000. So their cash flow for those 6 months would be $75,000. On the next slide, we show the 2020 cash flow of $75,000, and then you'll subtract the 2019 cash flow, and you'll also factor out the federal aid received. In this case, it would be the Paycheck Protection Program dollars. The calculation shows a reduction in business of $100,000, and that translates to 44%. So you're above the 25% threshold. You would be eligible for $100,000 based on this example from this sample business. They would be eligible for up to $100,000 in grant funds, and we'll get to how that's distributed shortly. This slide shows the last 3 slides all together. Once again, your 2019 cash flow calculation is shown in there, the 2020 cash flow on the next column, and how to calculate your reduction in business. Applications submitted by October 23rd And we talked about the pro rata share before. And what that means, there's $400 million in grant funding available. If $1 billion in requests come in, everyone's application would be reduced accordingly. So in the previous example, they were eligible for 100,000. If they had to be reduced, they would get $40,000. If they had to, $1 billion in applications. So everyone would receive a percentage of what they applied for. If there's less than $400 million in applications, that pro rata share would not be in play. Be very careful when filling out the application that your taxpayer identification number and your legal business name match. And they need to match what you submitted in your IRS tax forms. When you submit your tax forms to the IRS, again, I can't stress this enough, you need to make sure that those numbers and those names are exactly as they appear on your IRS forms that you input on the online application. And if there is money left over after the initial period, a second round could be considered. Application review will take about a month. So if October 23rd is the deadline, sometime around Thanksgiving, you would expect funds to be dispersed. We don't know how many applications will come in. There are over 80,000 businesses in the state of South Dakota that do qualify for this funding. So we could receive 100 million, we could receive $1 billion in application, we could receive more. We just don't know at this time. So we would encourage anyone to apply, even if you don't think you qualify, because of the unknowns at the other end of this application process of how many dollars are available versus how many dollars are requested. Only businesses that have submitted applications by the deadline will be eligible. Again, October 23rd is the deadline. It's not an extension to October 24th. It's October 23rd. The presentation that you've just watched will be available at greaterhuron.com. And it will be an online only application. And I think our legislators might be able to give us more information about where that will be available. Questions for the legislative panel will follow after remarks. And since he's sitting here to my right, we'll start with Senator Jim White and then go to Roger Chase and then online to Representative Bartles.
Thank you, Ted. Again, thank you folks for taking the time to be with us this morning, afternoon probably. I think as we sat through the governor's presentation of this legislation, one of the things that she stressed was this is a great program, but the only way it's going to be successful is for you legislators as salespeople out there talking to your constituents one-on-one or making the information available. And we can't stress that enough. I know there's a lot of businesses that have never had the opportunity to apply for grants before. And there's a little bit of uncertainty and uneasiness about that. But I want to assure you that this is the real thing. The Congress used this basis to avoid what they call a recession, meaning that by injecting stimulus dollars into our economy at this point, it keeps us from developing further into a recession down the road. And it's an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure down the road type thought process. So if you or anyone that you know has sustained a loss due to pandemic conditions, we encourage you to follow through with the process today. We look forward to being available and giving you any examples or advice that we can. In most cases, we encourage you to talk to either your banker or an accountant as they're aware of probably the possibilities of your eligibility. So I'll turn it over to Representative Chase.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's great to be with you today. I'm a representative, but I'm really here as a legislator, and I appreciate the work that Senator White and Hugh Bartels have put in on this. I know they were two of the main instigators to come up with this program and find something that was feasible and workable and that we could get behind and support. For many of you as small businesses in South Dakota, you've never even thought about applying for help or getting assistance. But this pandemic has been a unique situation and puts us all in a whole different limelight. And there are businesses in South Dakota that have done very well through this whole process. And there are businesses, obviously, that have been impacted very negatively. Restaurants, lodging, bed and breakfast, daycare facilities, cleaning services. A lot of those businesses that, were always in demand suddenly had to shut down and, were impacted in a negative way. So by no means do we want you to feel like you were not successful in having to fill out this program. You deserve it, and hopefully we can make some cash flows work out and some businesses be sustainable throughout this whole process. So we encourage you to follow through on the application. We will be around if you have questions, and I encourage you to follow through and take use of this program. Like we said, $400 million has been set aside. We have no idea how many applications will come in and the dollar amount that will be attached to it. Like I said, there's a lot of businesses that have not seen losses that won't be applying for it. But for those of you that have seen the problems, by all means, take advantage of it, fill it out, and get it taken care of.
Thank you, Representative Chase. Representative Bartels, if you would.
I'd like to thank Senator White for inviting me to be part of this. I worked real hard on this, and so is the senator and the rest of appropriations. There's 18 senators and House members that have spent lots of hours on this. We'd have a good case for a minimum wage violation at this point on pay, but we don't get paid that way. So what I'm going to talk about is a couple of things. I think in your slide, you kind of referred to the caveat for the 25% reduction in business at the end of the calculation. I think that's going to be at the top of the calculation, 25% reduction in sales, but I can't promise that, but I think that's at the top of the calculation. I just got off the phone before this started with Liza Clark, the Commissioner of Bureau and Finance, who's kind of running this program. And any minute now, I expect that the legislators will get an email from the governor's office that they're going to announce a press release regarding this program. The highlights of that press release are going to be that they've hired an accounting firm called Guidehouse. It's a firm that's spun off out of Price Waterhouse, and they've been doing grant applications like this for several states. They've been working with them since about last Wednesday and putting this grant application together. And it will all be online, and it will be available through the covidsd.gov website is where you're going to find it. And later this afternoon, it should be some information up on covidsd.gov. I'd wait till about 2:30, 3 o'clock to look for it. It'll be up a little bit after the press release comes out. Guidehouse will actually be doing some virtual training where you'll be able to link to it off of that website. They'll be posting frequently asked questions, and all this will show up on Tuesday. All the links to this won't show up until Tuesday. Guidehouse is going to process the applications and work through who qualifies and who doesn't qualify, and if we have to prorate it, they will also be doing those calculations. We just don't have the staff and state government to handle this, and so it's been farmed out to Guidehouse. The 12/30 deadline for the state to spend it doesn't apply to the money you receive. You do not have to spend this money before December 30th. Once it's granted to you, it's deemed spent under the guidelines from the federal government. I'd like to stress that your applications will be private. They will not be shared with anybody. They'll be held confidential at the state level. But the fact you received a grant will not be private. Your name and the dollar amount will show on opensd.gov. So people will know that you qualified for a grant and that you received one. I've been watching my email. We're supposed to get an email to legislators just before the press release, and I've been expecting it to come anytime during this conversation, but it hasn't. So this is kind of happening news right now, and hope it's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bartles. We've got a few questions online. Again, if you want to ask a question, type it into the chat that should appear at the bottom of your screen. Question number 1 for the legislators: if a business started July 1st, 2019, would we calculate eligibility using the small business requirements? Representative Bartles, can you answer that question?
I think they'd have to go into the small business program. The deadlines for, let me check it here just real quick, but for the small business, you have to have organized, I think it's between September 1st and June 1st. So it would have organized prior to that September 1st, so they would have to apply as a small business,
Okay, thank you.
a new business.
The next question: are these on a cash versus accrual basis? Representative Bartles, can you answer that one?
The answer to that is that we tried to make this an operational cash. Those are some really definitions. I've had several accountants call me already and ask that same question. I think it's non-cash expenses that will be excluded. If you're accruing expenses or writing off expenses over time, I think you can include them. We're not asking you to change your accounting system, but Guidehouse will directly answer all the accounting questions. Any answer we give you today is our best understanding. Guidehouse will be the final rule on how it's going to be done, though.
Very good. Here's a really good one that'll pertain to everyone that receives this funding. Is this a taxable grant?
My understanding is yes. It's just like the PPP loans are taxable. The loan isn't taxable, but you can't deduct the expenses, so it's the same thing. So.
Okay. Next question: what is and is not included as relates to non-cash expenses?
Well, my definition of that as a banker is amortization, depreciation, things like that. And it's really, we're trying to go on operational expenses, so it would exclude major capital purchases as well, or capital sales. One of the things we really focused in on is, say you were a trucking company and you sold a couple of trucks in order to keep your business open. We're not going to make you count the income from the sale of the trucks.
Okay, next question. The dates are March 1st through August 31st. Are these dates firm?
My understanding is yes. We're going to make this as simple as possible and a short application, and we really don't have time to work through a bunch of different time series or application series. It originally started out just 3 months, and the legislature extended that to 6 months because we know that some businesses, you know, had a backlog of work, and they actually worked through March, April, May, and then they were affected later in the summer. And there's a lot of industries like that. And like I've talked to some software programmers that had a lot of work to do, but they didn't get any new orders. So now they're out of work. So we tried to help those people. Some people, it's going to be the opposite because they were really, right away, they hit problems. But then later on, you know, like some of the tourist business did pretty well the second half of the summer. So that's kind of a catch-22 by extending it for the 6 months, but it is that time frame. And by the rules of the grant from the federal government, it has to be for expenses March 1st, so it's not going to back up on the other end at all.
Next question, will there be any requirements showing how the business spent the grant dollars? Or will there be any other requirements once the business has been granted the funds?
I don't believe there'll be any requirements for that, but there is the possibility of audit. And you'll notice that in the grant application, you will be audited. I believe one of the exhibits you're going to have to file is a copy of your 2019 tax return, which would be the starting basis of audit to see if your calculations were reasonable. We will get audited, and so we're going to audit. I assume that some of the businesses will be audited. That would be, I think, the follow-up requirement. You can spend the money however you want to. I mean, you can buy a piece of equipment, you can give your employees bonuses, you can pay off a loan, you can get your bills current, however you want to use it. There's no restrictions on how to use it. Hopefully you'll put it back in the South Dakota economy and it'll do some good.
Next question, businesses that had SBA loans in good standing were given several months of loan forgiveness. Does that have to be deducted as federal aid?
Again, this is a question I'd refer to Guidehouse, but I don't believe it does because that's loans. You still owe the money on it. It was just deferred, is my understanding.
Okay. When deducting the PPP dollars, is that the forgiven portion or the entire dollar amount of the PPP award?
Again, this needs to go to Guidehouse, but my understanding it's the entire PPP. You'll have to look in the application. The problem with just using the forgiven part is a lot of businesses won't know before the period is over whether their loan is being forgiven or not. I don't think many businesses will. I talked to several banks last week, and one bank I talked to had 180 applications in, and they hadn't received any input back from the SBA at all. Matter of fact, I didn't talk to any bank that had input back from the SBA. So it's the entire, and there is some guidance on the fact that the PPP loans are federal aid that you can't double up on in the guidance. So it'd be the entire amount, I believe. But again, I'm going to defer to the final opinion of Guidehouse.
Okay. Another question, if there's any problems with the online application, who should someone contact?
I believe it'll be Guidehouse. There'll be a link on the website, I'm sure, for help and assistance. There'll be links to Guidehouse if you have a specific question that isn't answered in the frequently asked questions or in the training. Guidehouse would be your contact. I'm sure the link off of covidsd.gov will take you to Guidehouse.
Okay. And does Guidehouse have a website set up that will accommodate this sort of traffic?
It's my understanding, yes. We're not the first state that they've done. That's one of the reasons I think BFM accepted them. They had several proposals for accounting firms, but in my conversations with Bureau of Finance and Management, they were impressed with the fact that Guidehouse had done this for 7 or 8 states, I think was the number. And they offered a lot of help and suggestions on the application and to make the process as quick and as seamless as possible. So they selected Guidehouse.
Very good. We have reached the end of our questions at this point. If you have one you would like to submit, now would be the time. We'll give everyone a moment to do that. And while we're wrapping up, I'd like to note that the slides and a recording of the webinar today will be available on greaterhuron.com later today. Takes a little while for the video to convert and for us to get it uploaded to the website. But the slides and the video from today's presentation will be available later today on greaterhuron.com. And if I'm hearing correctly, the covid.sd.com website Or is it covid.sd.gov? We'll host the application link.
It's .gov.
.gov. covid.sd.gov will be the hosting site for the application.
I think it's,
Another question came in here. Oh, go ahead.
I think it's just covidsd.gov.
covid.sd.gov.
Now, it's the one that all the information's been posted on. It's their central point for all COVID related things. You type in your browser COVID SD, it'll jump up in your choices.
We did have another question come in. If you are not at the 25% reduction, should you still apply in case there's a second application window?
I don't know. That it's up to you. If you want to go through the work, you could certainly can. I don't know if the window will get expanded or where the money will go on the second round. I know in our resolution, we asked the administration and the governor to come back to the Joint Committee on Appropriations and get some more input on where the money should go. I don't think it would be a problem to do that if you think you can work through the application, but I just don't know if they'll expand that or not. That would be, probably won't be decided until November. And when we do look at extra money, I mean, we're going to look at extra money from all sources, just not this 400 million or the 40 million for nonprofits. We'll look at all the extra money from all the programs, from the hospitals, the community care providers. I think most of the excess money will come from cities and counties. There's a lot of cities and counties that are having a hard time, I think, coming up with enough bills that are COVID related to pay, to utilize their allocation. We expect some money to come back from there, and that might be the majority of it. I see there's someone on here from the city of Huron, but they didn't nod up or down when I was talking, so I don't know if they're having problems spending it or not, but a lot of the smaller communities are really having an issue with their allocation. I know the city of Watertown is going to be pretty close to spending all of theirs because the guidance expanded to the full fire department, not just the ambulance service. So that really helped us spend all the money here in Watertown.
Very good. Thank you to everyone who attended today's presentation. We're going to give the legislators one more chance to wrap things up, and we'll start with Jim White.
Representative, I had a question at a presentation yesterday about in the event that someone did make a minor mistake on their application and it was sent in early enough, do you think that they would have an opportunity to correct that? Would the accounting firm make that available back to them if there was time before the final due date?
I would think so, but again, I don't know how the process is going to work. It's not, that's, they're going to have to make some allocations for that. Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, I think in following up then the presentation, we very much appreciate, it looks like we have a number of people on here today that are out there. We hope that you can share this message with others. And again, it's going to be on the website here so that you can share with them the information going forward. You have that opportunity now. And don't be bashful. We're here we want to get this money out. It's not like we're hoping that we still have some left. We want to get this money out. So we hope that you use every opportunity to get the word out to anyone that can qualify. So thank you again.
Just one more thing to add as the discussion was going on is when does the money come? The money will be out yet in 2020, and you can use that funds for whatever you see that you need. You do not have to expend those funds in 2020. So you've got some latitude to work with there. This is money that you need as a business. You can kind of determine your future cash flow and work with it from there. But we just want you to apply and know that this is available and take advantage of it, folks.
Thank you to our legislators for participating in today's webinar. Thank you to everyone who attended.
I see Representative Lynn Snyder's on here. Maybe he should have a chance to talk. He's mute.
Representative Snyder is available here online. Landon, could you unmute Representative Lynn Schneider? Give him a chance to say a few words if he'd like.
All right, can you hear me? Am I coming
We
through?
can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay. Well, surely first I would echo what the other legislators have said, and I surely want to thank Hugh for taking his time to join us today. And again, the Appropriations Committee, of which Jim White and Hugh Bartels have been a part of, have put in tons and tons of work here. Just like Hugh said, I wouldn't want to make that a minimum wage type deal. It wouldn't have paid very well, and not that it does anyway, but thanks for all that work, and thanks for all of you for joining us today. And I would also just echo that you also tell your business associates, friends, and neighbors to check this out, because we really do want to get all this money dispersed and to work among the small businesses, so that first of all, it helps you survive in a much better position, and also puts our South Dakota economy in a better position too. So thanks to Greater Huron for heading this up today.
Thank you, Representative Snyder. Thank you to our legislators. Thank you to our attendees. Again, this presentation will be available on our website, greaterhuron.com. We will also include a link to the application once it becomes available, which at this time sounds like it will be early next week. We'll try to keep up with any questions that we can. And in the meantime, thank you everyone for attending. And this will conclude our webinar. Have a great day, everyone.